So, where does a soul actually call home? If you had to pinpoint the exact geographical coordinates of your spiritual center, could you do it? It's a massive metaphysical question, isn't it? Today, we are exploring a really fascinating 2006 philosophical text that attempts to answer exactly that by outlining specific rules and boundaries for where we go after we pass. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a translated text by an author named Feng titled Explaining the Regional Properties of Souls. Now, our goal here isn't to prove or disprove these esoteric concepts, but rather to systematically unpack the author's core premise. And that premise is the idea that souls aren't just free-floating entities, but are actually bound by strict regional and cultural properties. It's a highly structured way of looking at the afterlife, and we're going to map it all out for you. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Souls and regional properties. 2. The structure of life. 3. Reincarnation anomalies explained. 4. The dream connection. And 5. Navigating the afterlife.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1. Souls and regional properties, the comfort of the familiar.
This right here establishes the foundational claim of the entire text, what it calls the regional properties of souls. The author defines this as the concept that all souls are bound to reincarnate into the specific places and cultures where they are most familiar. Basically, the claim is that individuals naturally return to highly familiar cultural or geographical environments. For example, according to this framework, Japanese individuals usually reincarnate into Japanese cultures, Chinese into Chinese cultures, and so on. The theory states that, well, we've never heard of a Tibetan living Buddha coming from Africa or Europe, and it uses this to argue that a soul naturally seeks out its own original cultural environment. Now, what's really interesting is how the author uses a super common proverb to anchor this esoteric idea. The apple never falls far from the tree. The text uses this to illustrate that souls inherently seek safety. They absolutely crave familiarity, and this creates a kind of regional gravity. Just like anyone living in a strange place within a totally alien culture might feel out of place, lonely, and just eager to go home, the text argues that going home is every soul's ultimate wish, and home is simply defined as your most familiar place. Moving on to Section 2, the structure of life, metaphors of the soul. Here, the text introduces the underlying mechanics of this theory through a brilliant scientific metaphor. The author asserts that similar soul structures naturally attract and fuse, much like water droplets fusing easily together or water seamlessly mixing with milk. On the flip side, alien cultures repel each other, exactly like water and oil. It's presented as a fundamental characteristic of their very structures. Like attracts like. Birds of a feather flock together, right? If a culture doesn't conform to a soul's contents, it lacks gravity for them, and fusion, meaning reincarnation into that space, is literally impossible. The text builds on this by stating that the size of a soul world is directly proportional to the content of its soul. To elaborate on this, the author gives the example of someone who has lived in a remote village their entire life. According to this framework, that person will reincarnate into that exact same village. Why? Well, because their soul's structure only contains knowledge of that specific environment and absolutely nothing else. Their life structure is entirely formed in accordance with life in that one village. Okay, but what about the exceptions? That brings us to Section 3, Reincarnation Anomalies Explained, Testing the Boundaries. So, if souls always just boomerang back to their own villages, why do some reincarnate miles and miles away? The explanation lies in what the text calls carriers of life. Souls are spiritual entities that need physical bodies, carriers, to actually function. If a person dies and there isn't a new carrier available in their immediate comfort zone, the soul initiates an escalating geographical search. It starts with a radius of 10 kilometers. If no body is available, it expands to 20 kilometers, then 50, and finally, up to a 100-kilometer radius to find a family blessed with a newborn. Following this logic, the text suggests theoretical verification methods for grieving families. If you wanted to find a late relative, you track that expanding radius. Once you locate a newborn within that 10 to 100 kilometers zone born shortly after the passing, the text claims you might verify their identity by checking for a specific birthmark or simply by sensing the child's identity by the heart. Of course, the author adds a major caveat here. If your relative has already advanced to heaven or another space entirely, they aren't going to be found locally. Let's look at how the author backs this up in Section 4, the dream connection, the posited proof. The author totally recognizes that some might not easily accept this regional concept, so the text attempts to verify it through something we all experience every single night, dreaming. I'll pose the text's direct question to you right now. Would the vast majority of Europeans dream of Asian or African people when they sleep? Think about your own dreams for a second. Who populates them? Are they filled with highly familiar faces and settings, or entirely foreign ones? According to the text logic, the answer to that question is a resounding of course they would not. The author frames our daily dreams as tangible proof of a soul's regional limitations. Dreams reflect the literal contents of our souls. Even if you move to a foreign society later in life, the text argues that the frequency of foreign people appearing in your dreams is going to remain quite low. The only exception offered here is if fragments from a past lifetime are somehow emerging in your current subconscious. Pretty wild, right? Now we're zooming out for Section 5, Navigating the Afterlife, the Cosmic Application. This is where the regional theory scales way up from earthly geography to cosmic preparation. The text introduces a central rule. What does not exist in our consciousness has no existence in our life. If you hope to go to heaven, but you know absolutely nothing about it, your soul is totally unprepared to go there. The text insists that the transformation of life is subject to strict, meticulous management. You literally cannot enter a heavenly space unless you have prior conscious knowledge of it. If you have no concept of a spiritual guide, the text warns, you wouldn't recognize him even if he were standing right next to you. So let's see how this builds into actionable advice. The text identifies a specific destination, the 1,000-year world. This is presented as the easiest place to which people can advance. But the method requires actual work. You must self-cultivate and self-refine according to the lifestyle of the celestials who live there. By studying its guide and really focusing your consciousness on that specific realm, you effectively expand your soul's familiar territory. You are essentially pre-programming your regional property for the afterlife so you can go there directly when you pass. So the crucial point comes down to 3 final actionable rules from the author to expand your life spaces before time runs out. 1. Do not long for the ephemeral, passing mortal world, but for a better place. 2. Understand the place you yearn for as much as possible, meaning study it so it truly enters your consciousness. And 3. Be reasonable and willing to advance. We're going to wrap up with this lingering question, directly derived from the text's ultimate warning. What exists in your consciousness? If our afterlife destinations are truly limited by the boundaries of our current awareness and the familiarity of our souls, then the most important work we might do is simply expanding what we know. It's a fascinating framework, challenging us to look at our dreams, our comfort zones, and the borders of our own minds. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep expanding that consciousness.